for women to vote, for the Civil War to change things, for California, for Texas, for everything. People died. People died. But history always cycles. We're at the cusp of change. You and I right now, when people say this is the most interesting time in history, so keep your eyes open, they're telling the truth. You and I go down in the annals of history as people who stood on the front lines and said, we will no longer accept officer safety over my civil liberties. We will overturn Terry versus Ohio, and we will overturn the Supreme Court and make them electable. You and I will do that. You and I. Go to my website, deletelaws.com. Go to my website, deletelaws.com. If you can buy one of these wall graphics, buy it. If you can't, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you for free. Print the sucker out. Print it out and talk about it with your friends. And you say, holy shit, look at this, Mom. Holy shit, Mama, look at that. Oh man, Mama, what happened in 1968? What happened, Mama? We're gonna talk about something important today so that when others talk to you and they give you a fact and say, here's a fact, you're gonna be able to say, that's not conceptual analysis. Your fact is not conceptual analysis. And because you're just spitting out a fact, it really has no merit on the timeline of history. An individual fact on this timeline truly doesn't mean much unless you're able to correlate it into conceptual analysis. I'm gonna begin and I'm not gonna stop. And let's go. There were 20 lynchings in the year 1935. 18 black people were lynched in the year 1935, and 2 white people were lynched in the year 1935. Now, when I give you that fact without a conceptual analysis, and that's a specific term that you should know what it means, and I'm gonna define this conceptual analysis now. 1935, 20 people were lynched. 20 people were lynched in 1935. Okay, cool. When I tell you there was 20 people lynched in 1935, what's your reaction? Tell me, even if you're watching on YouTube, tell me right now. When I say that there's 20 people lynched in 1935, what's your reaction? Tell me your reaction. What's your gut reaction when I tell you that 18 black people were lynched and 2 white people were lynched in the year 1935? Franklin Delano Roosevelt, largely considered the greatest president in US history, was president at that time when 20 human beings were drug outside in front of a mob of people and lynched. Tell me your reaction. I want to feel you. Tell me, okay? Great. You know what my reaction is? Things are getting better. Things are getting better in America. That's my reaction. And why do I say that? Because in conceptual analysis of the fact of 20 people are lynched in 1935, I'm going to zoom in now. I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about. Now, that's 1935 right here. Am I on track here? 1935, 1936, 0. So this is the worst. This is the worst it's going to be. And it'll never be worse than that. That's the worst year before it drops, and it does not go back up into double digits. I'm very glad that was the last of the worst year. In conceptual analysis now, we have to go, it's 1935 here, 20 people are lynched. Well, what were the laws that were passed in 1935? What was going on in America in 1935? And how come the lynchings dropped to 0 for the white people in 1936 and 1937 and 8 and 7 black people in the years 1936 and 1937? Well, because there was a big pushback by white people in Dijon versus Oregon. What had happened is the Communist Party was rising up along with the Socialist Party, and what they did is they pushed back against police powers. Dijon versus Oregon is the Supreme Court case that is based on pushing back against police powers. So now what I'm doing is I'm parlaying how many people were lynched with why the lynchings dropped in 1936 and 1937. And now what I'm going to look at here, the next thing I'm going to look at, I'm going to drop down into the lynchings, and I'm going to find out in which state these people were lynched and how many people were lynched at once. That's going to give me a better barometer in understanding what's acceptable in different quadrants of America. Were all of those lynchings in the South? That's a good question. That's a very good question, right? So now Dijon versus Oregon is when white people are pushing back against police power, and that goes to court in 1937. Could that have anything to do with the white lynchings going to zero? Could that have anything to do with I don't know. It's a good question though, isn't it? Now let's go backwards a little bit to really understand what happened in the year 1935. So in 1935, we have 18 and 2. In 34, we have 0 whites and 15 black people. In 1933, two white people, 24 black people. But look at this. Herbert Hoover seemed to have a better handle on it. Look at that. Look at that right there. Herbert Hoover had it down to 1, 1, 2 for white people. 20 people, black people being lynched, 12 and 6 is still disgusting, right? Nasty, right? But then when Franklin Delano Roosevelt comes in, now let's follow something really closely. This is conceptual analysis you're not going to get in a book. You're not going to get this in a book. So here's what happens. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he's getting his ass kicked. He's getting his ass kicked. He comes into office. It goes from 8 and 32 to 26 to 15 to 20 to 0 white to 8 black people to 0. What happens right here? What happens right here? What happens specifically? There's a specific thing that you have to factor in conceptual analysis to understand how Franklin Delano Roosevelt got his hands on control of the KKK, at least lynching white people, because it went to 0. In the year 1937, Franklin Delano Roosevelt nominated and placed Hugo Black on the Supreme Court. Hugo Black was a lifetime member of the... Could that have anything to do with being able to reason with and deal with white supremacists when it comes to at least hanging white people? It seems to have. I don't know. These are bigger questions. These are for you to answer. How do I know? I'm just a regular layperson. But what I'm not going to do is tell you, man, 1935, 20 lynchings that year. Someone told you a fact. Okay, 20 lynchings that year. Great. What else? What else was going on? So I understand what 20 lynchings means. What does it mean in the grand scale of things? The Marijuana Tax Act passes in 1937. What does that have to do with the startup of Standard Oil in 1863? Is there a connection to those two things? 1863 to 1937, just randomly in my head. What does the breakup of Standard Oil in 1911 have to do with the Harrison Act passing? You can say that, oh yeah, we broke up Standard Oil in 1911 and then we passed the first Pharmaceutical Act in 1914 where you had to get your prescription opium or cannabis from a doctor. And that's the first time that ever happens in history. Why does that happen? Oh, because we got to get a hand on opioids. No. Conceptual analysis. Understand what was going on in our country right then and there. In 1911, a few hundred white guys, super rich, super powerful, broke up Standard Oil and took possession of it. They looked down the road at Mexico and over at Indian hemp and said, let's put cannabis on the banned act of the 1914 Harrison Act so it wouldn't compete with their fossil fuel industry. Andrew Mellon invests in that fossil fuel industry. His son, Harry Anslinger, son-in-law, is his heir to the fossil fuel industry, which passes the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937. That's called conceptual analysis. That's taking multiple parts of history and tying them together, especially in contrast and association with our Bill of Rights. So in Gardner or in Tennessee or Wilson, the holding, what these guys up here hold to be constitutional, the holding, they say that probable cause is a loose term, depending on, what's going on the scene. No, it's not. That's a bastardization of your Fourth Amendment right. That is not at all what probable cause is. Probable cause is when you have broken the law. Probable cause is when you have broken the law. So now I'm showing you the Fourth Amendment. What year that happened? 1776. Now let's do conceptual analysis, was what that judge said in 1985 or 1995. Probable cause is a loose term. No, it's not. No, it's not. So the conceptual analysis, if you go back to the actual documentation in the beginning, the basic conceptual analysis is that judge who said that literally is going by the bastardization of what these judges did here. He's going by stare decisis, jurisprudence, cases that were before him where judges were determining what probable cause is. Probable cause is what you can be arrested for. And in Terry v. Ohio, that was reduced to reasonable suspicion. And see more conceptual analysis? After Terry v. Ohio, that's the prison system. That's called conceptual analysis. People say police are not racist. God bless them. I hope that they're not. The result of Terry versus Ohio is a racist system. The analysis, the conceptual analysis, without my opinion, without my slant, the white population dropped by 3,000%. The black population went up by 12,000%. The results of Terry are racist. The conceptual analysis leads me to that. A friend of mine the other day texted me, a guy I know I've gone out with, I partied with him in LA, a lot of fun. I love, hey, L, that's your initial, L. Love you, L. I love you, brother. He said to me, Chille, my friend said to me, state of California, how many unarmed black men were killed by police in the year 2019? You got me, bro. You proved that none of these other people matter at all. They don't matter at all. When you look at something micro, you can't look at it macro. When you're looking through a microscope, you can't look over at the horizon, can you? So if you want to go into a microscope and say, oh, according to who, police or FBI or whoever statistics that are created, this many unarmed black men were killed by police. How many were Terry stopped? How many went to jail? How many were Terry stopped in relationship to the white population, to the Asian population, to women, to men, to age groups? In which locations of town were they Terry stopped at? Because Terry stops, as we know, 9 out of 10 people on this wall are dead when they were Terry stopped. I didn't make that up. Those are statistics. You want to go by statistics? Me too. I agree with you. I'm more conservative than you could possibly imagine. I'm for wiping away all gun laws. But why would I say you wipe away all gun laws? Again, this is conceptual analysis. This is understanding history in a more direct approach. So here's what I'm talking about. Now, you can read The Racist Origins of Gun Control by Steve Ekwall, Ekwall, and he has some gun control legislation that he's listed that go back to before slavery, to black codes, that goes really in depth. And then Clayton E. Kramer, he wrote The Racist Origins or The Racist Inception of Gun Control. And his PDF, both of these are very short PDFs. So when I say that all gun laws are based on race, the first major gun act is the 1911 Sullivan Act. And this is when black people are moving out of rural America and into New York City, into Chicago, into Baltimore. And they're moving there. How come? Why are they moving there? Why is the 1911 Sullivan Act passed? You can say that they passed the Sullivan Act that made it so that if you were a person, you had to get your gun rights from the president of the police bureau. Sure, you know that fact. Very good. Very good. I'm glad you know that fact. How come, and I'm not talking condescending to you, I'm just fed up with people feeding me a single fact and like, hey, Chille, this proves everything. This proves you're wrong. Okay. So the 1911 Sullivan Act is passed by Governor Tim Sullivan in New York City. And I believe it's an executive order, meaning that he just says it, I'm going to do it, and then he just does it. And even if it went through the legislature, most of the New York legislatures in the year 1911, they would have passed that act. And it was specifically intended, the president of the police bureau openly said, I will not give a license to any black people. It won't happen. So they passed the act specifically to make sure that black people couldn't get guns. If you want to get a concealed carry today in California or in New York or in Cleveland or anywhere you go, you have to get permission to have a concealed carry license from the president of the police bureau. Here in California, I have to sign up to be a reserve officer for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. Google LASD gangs. I don't want to be a reserve sheriff for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. God bless them. I hope that they retire soon and they retire healthy and happy. The conceptual analysis, though, of Sullivan, 1911, the Sullivan Act that limited your gun rights to having to ask the cops to have a gun, it's based on the 1890 lynchings. The 1890 lynchings were the worst lynchings in the history of America. where they were lynching thousands of people over that decade from 1888 to 1901. Just thousands of people. So Black rural Americans said, we are moving to the city. So they packed their shit and they moved to the city. Well, the city people, the Northerners hadn't really been around Black people. There wasn't the same influx of, in history books, this is the Black Negro laborer. But the truth is, the only thing that Black people could do was labor, because they weren't allowed to read, they weren't allowed to write, they weren't allowed to get an education. And if they tried to, it was made extraordinarily difficult. This has a lot to do with the conceptual analysis of why the Sullivan Act would be passed. Remember, back here, we're still in segregation. So what are Black people referred to as? What are they referred to as? Black people are Jim Crow. Black people are the feeble-minded clown that doesn't have a consciousness. They haven't evolved all the way. They're still from the apes. That's the depiction of Black people in the year 1911 in a very big way. Moving forward. So now we kind of understand why the 1911 Sullivan Act, but why the chilling effect? Why is there such a chilling effect between the races? Why are white people and white families throughout the 1900s, going all the way back to the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, the relationships between Black people and white people is chilled. It doesn't really get going again until the 20s and 30s, when jazz music really kicks up a notch. As soon as jazz starts, man, white people love jazz. Oh, wait a minute. The music that Black people created, called jazz, reignited the relationship between Black people and white people. Oh my God. So now we learned here that conceptual analysis and understanding the relationships sociologically between the races matters based on what's going on in our culture. It's not just a fact that in 1920 alcohol was prohibited. It was that jazz music began. And then white people and Black people began to commingle again. So let's take it even a step further about the commingling of Black people. So now, we talked about this, the Pace versus Alabama case. This is what criminalized interracial relationships. You're not allowed to have a relationship with a Black woman or a white woman or an Asian woman or a Filipino woman. There's a big influx of Asian people too. And you're not allowed to have a relationship with them. The Supreme Court, who we don't elect, the people who are ruining our country today, they uphold the constitutionality that interracial relationships are illegal. And they uphold the prison sentence of Orlando Pace and Mary Cox. And of course, when Orlando Pace is in prison, okay. So now what this does is criminalizes interracial relationships. What is the conceptual analysis of that fact? This happened in 1883. In the year 1884, the most in record, 160 white people are lynched. 160 white people lynched. In the year 1884, what happened in 1883? Pace versus Alabama. Then in the year 1885, 110 white people are lynched. Far surpassing Black people being lynched, both years. And then the third year in 1880. And then in the year, let me get some water. And this is it, this is the last one. So then in the year 1886, Black lynchings finally pass up white lynchings 74 to 64. I'm done, okay. So don't come to me, trolls, with your fact. Don't come to me with your fact, okay? You didn't analyze it deep enough. I'm sorry. Don't waste my time with pointing out a fact, because you're wasting our time. And we have a bigger goal here. The bigger goal is to overturn Terry versus Ohio, to get you guys to register for that website so that we have a coalition of people that we overturn Terry v. Ohio. I don't sell this wall graphic so that you can have a memento of some shit you learned. I sell this wall graphic in extraordinary detail so that you look up who the president was, how many lynchings there were, what were the Supreme Court cases, who are the important figureheads going on. Does anybody know who this man is? Does anybody know who he is? His name's W.E.B. Du Bois, okay? If you haven't read his writings or listened to him speak, go to listen to him speak on YouTube, W.E.B. Du Bois. He has an hour-long dissertation. It's beautiful. It's very boring because he's very dry and flat. But if you listen to it 3 or 4 times and boom, you fall asleep, the information he lays out is beautiful. So that's conceptual analysis. Now you understand. Please don't come to me with, well, in the year this happened. So go ahead. How do you respond to that? I respond to it by making a video and explain to them that the conceptual analysis of history is far greater than one specific event. They all tie together. They all work together in conjunction with one another. And you have to know some key Supreme Court cases. You have to know some of these. If you don't know some of these, you and me and our country's in trouble. If you don't know some of those, we're for a long time. Because when you don't know them, you don't know that these guys are the ones doing it. They're doing it. They're not elected. And this is only about conceptual analysis. So I'm going to try to stay as focused as I can. Here's a conceptual analysis for you of the Supreme Court so you understand the things that I understand. In the history of time, here's how it worked. The Bill of Rights is formed and it's signed in 1776 and ratified to the Constitution in 1789. Now, this Bill of Rights is the paramount document for you and for me. Now, the Constitution, when it lays out how our country runs. And we all know how our country runs. Our country runs on a system of checks and balances. We elect Congress, we elect the president, and these guys are appointed. Like I said, it goes back to the Constitution. Right here, it said the House of Representatives would appoint senators to the US Congress. Now, right here, in the year 1913, would you believe it? There was an uprising of people and they said that we want to elect senators because things aren't working out for us. Things are going really, really, really poorly for us. There's no checks and balances on senators. There's no way to get them out. There's no checks and balances on senators, and there's no way to get them out. And in the history of America, not a single Supreme Court personnel has been impeached, not one ever. Okay? So in the year 1913, the conceptual analysis of understanding the importance of the people electing the people who would represent us was aspired to the truth. And what it was that we then elected senators. So that happened in the year 1913. How come that happened? Conceptual analysis would require critical thought to be that the laws and the way America was going back here was going so poorly that the rise up of people made it so that we would elect senators. And so then in the year 1920, not only did prohibition pass, so big changes are going on, big changes. Women get the right to vote with the 19th Amendment in the year 1920. Wow, why would that happen? Because it's tyrannical not to let women vote. But it says in the Constitution, though, that only men over 21 get to vote. And then that was only amended with the 15th Amendment that says only Black men over 21 get the right to vote. But these things changed. And then senators were elected here and these things changed. How'd that happen? Oh, you mean the right to assemble granted to us in the year 1791 was taken up by the people and we all assembled, we all got together under one banner to unite to demand that the Supreme Court becomes electable? Is that what happened in the year 2021? Yes, we got together and we changed this shit. You and I, we got together and we stood strong in the face of adversity because it's gonna get worse. Far worse. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Right this moment, these fundamental Christians have ultimate power over us. Do you think they're going to give it away? Do you think they're going to cede it? Do you think that power is going to be ceded? Is that what happens? Let's rewind just a moment. What did I say? With the 19th Amendment, women got the right to vote. In the year 1920, I was raised with 7 women, my mother, my aunt, my 3 cousins, and my 2 sisters. So, when I told my mom that putting the dishes away was woman's work when I was 7, I had to scrub the toilet for the next 7 years of my life with my hand. I can clean a bathroom in 15 minutes, okay? with no shame. It's not women's work, it's not maids' work, it's your work. It's your bathroom, you clean it. But when I was a child, did I tell my mother, no, I'm not gonna clean the bathroom? Did my mother have the power over me to make me stay in the bathroom on Saturdays till the toilet was scrubbed? Yes, she did. Did women have the power to pass the 19th Amendment in the year 1920? No, women did not. Women didn't have any power. Women could not vote. They did not have a voice. Eleanor Roosevelt is very clear in her memoirs. She wasn't allowed to speak. Eleanor Roosevelt could have been the mastermind for the war. I mean, there's so many people who've done studies on Roosevelt, so I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't know. I do know some of her memoirs clearly state that she had been limited because she was a woman. Highly intelligent, highly functionable, like far smarter than me. I mean, Eleanor Roosevelt didn't have a voice throughout FDR's administration, and he was president for 12 years. So what happened in the 19th Amendment? How come women got the right to vote? How come? Because good people stood up. Who's the loudest in our culture today? The authoritarians. They're the loudest. They're the loudest, aren't they? The people, don't you remember this? Don't you remember when you were on the playground as a kid? And now, if you're born after 2000, it doesn't count. But when you were a kid, if you're a Gen Xer, the bully on the playground who picked on me, no one stopped him. The bully was the loudest. And everybody didn't want to see the bully beat me up, but I got beat up anyway. And nobody stopped him. The kids who screamed the N-word on the playground in front of my black friend, the only black kid in my school, who was my friend, still my friend to this day. Joel, I love you, baby, right? I didn't say anything to them when they screamed the N-word. And I didn't scream it in front of Joel. I certainly said it, but not in front of Joel. I didn't say the N-word in front of Joel, ever. Never said the N-word in front of any black people when I was raised in my tiny town, because there was only a couple of black people. So we all used the N-word pretty normally. And I'm one of the good white people. Imagine that. I've seen the light. Imagine people who have not. So what that means, ultimately, the conceptual analysis of understanding how women got the right to vote, just you, the layperson you are, the layperson I am, just understanding how power works. The Native Americans didn't give up America. They didn't go, sure, take it. No, we slaughtered them. Okay. The Mexicans didn't give up California. We just took it. We just took Texas. We just took California. Did the weaker power demand that we change? No. The greater power overtook them and killed them. The lynchings, all those people got lynched. The weaker power didn't go, I demand that you don't lynch me. That never happened. The greater power lynched them. Women did not demand the right to vote. That never happened. The good white people, for the first time, because it was Anglo-Saxon Americans in 1919, just so you know. Black people had the right to vote, black males did, but they, it was still a very hairy time. They didn't really, anyway, that's another topic. I'm talking about conceptual analysis here. So women got the right to vote. Why? Because the white European men who had laid silent for so long finally spoke up. And if you watch my channel, you watch my videos, I always talk about history repeating itself. History happens in cycles. It's every 60 to 120 years, history happens in a very big way. Gigantic. In 1920, these things are happening. Look at the gigantic changes that are going on. The automobile is developed, and we passed Hendrick versus Maryland. And what this is where states can create traffic laws for vehicles in the year 1915. Gigantic changes are happening, both politically and culturally. Does that sound familiar? We are entering and moving into the digital surveillance era, like it or not. The Ring network has already been established. Your DNA is now already on file by the FBI because you took a DNA test. For women to vote, for the Civil War to change things, for California, for Texas, for everything, people died. But history always cycles. We're at the cusp of change. You and I right now, when people say this is the most interesting time in history, so keep your eyes open, they're telling the truth. You and I go down in the annuals of history as people who stood on the front lines and said, we will no longer accept officer safety over my civil liberties. We will overturn Terry versus Ohio, and we will overturn the Supreme Court and make them electable. You and I will do that. You and I. Go to my website, DeleteLaws.com. Go to my website, DeleteLaws.com. If you can buy one of these wall graphics, buy it. If you can't, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you for free. I'll send it to you. Not so that you go, oh, I ordered this. So you print the sucker out 60 inches. Put it somewhere. I can do you 33 inch or 45 inch, whatever you want. Print it out and you talk about it with your friends. And you say, holy shit, look at this, Mom. Holy shit, Mama, look at that. Oh man, Mama, what happened in 1968? What happened, Mama? Do you think in the year 1968, people were like, you know what? I'm gonna be worse. I know that the Industrial Revolution has happened and we're moving into a more modern society, but now people are gonna be more criminal. Or was the model penal code established in 1962? What the model penal code did was set up a bunch of laws that could be filed against you that would complement one another. And why does that have any relevance today? Because the model penal code is still the model today. And what exactly does it do? It classifies laws in different sections against people, against property, your mental state of mind. The prosecutor can determine your mental state of mind that you negligently or purposefully or willingly did these crimes, whether you did or not. And for other people, the prosecutors, like for Philando Castile's killer, they can ask the other questions where they exonerate him, that he didn't mean to do it, that it was because he was scared. The model penal code. So when you stack up a bunch of laws against you, and see if this sounds familiar. The model penal code classifies how to categorize charges against people. So what happens to you? You get arrested, you get charged with 4 crimes. The DA says, plead guilty to this one, I'll drop the other 3 or we go to court. You're for sure gonna get a fair trial though. Just go ahead, take your chances with the state. So here's a real quick conceptual analysis that you guys can do, and then you tell me what the results are. There's a guy named Zach Wester, Z-A-C-H Wester, W-E-S-T-E-R. Look him up, Zach Wester. Now, Zach Wester planted drugs. Wester planted drugs on hundreds of people, and a lab technician was suspicious because he was getting so many drug busts that she audited his body cam footage and come to find out Zach Wester had planted drugs on hundreds of people. He used a license plate reader, saw who had a previous drug record on that registered vehicle, then he pulled that vehicle over and planted drugs on those people. Hundreds. They had to throw out hundreds of cases against people, but it went bad. It went real bad. So one woman went to go bail her daughter out, but she was on assisted funding. So she spent the money she would spend on her prescription medication to get her daughter out, and she died. Another guy was in a custody battle with his daughter. He had a drug conviction a decade earlier. He'd been clean for 10 years. He was like one of the speakers at his Narcotics Anonymous group. And he was in a custody battle with his ex-wife. And when he got arrested, when Zach Wester planted drugs on him, he lost his daughters. And she married a guy in another state and took the kids out of state and got full custody. This is real shit, okay? So out of the hundreds of people that Zach Wester planted drugs on, and this is where I need you guys to vote. What percentage of people pled guilty? What percentage of people pled guilty when Zach Wester planted the drugs in their vehicle? What percentage? Was it none of them? Was it half of them? 70%? Like how many of them pled guilty to having the drugs that Zach Wester planted in their car? How many? 5%? 99%? 75%? 100%? None. Most of them? 90, 10, not one. Come on, tell me, vote, tell me. There's 300, 250 people in here. Tell me how many people. 215 people. My dyslexia spins numbers. I told you I had dyslexia. It was just 215. I said 250 because my brain saw 251. Ugh, I hate that. I fucking hate it. Come on, tell me, keep going. I want to know. What do you think? And are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure of your guess? Are you sure of your guess? 60%. You guys want me to stop the suspense? Okay. Whoever guessed, whoever said, how many? Did anybody look up his arrest videos yet of him planting drugs on people? It's atrocious. So all of them, that's the correct answer. Of the hundreds of people who Zach Wester planted drugs on them, all of them pled guilty to the drugs so they could take the deal from the district attorney. So that's the result of that. You just go with the officer. You're going to get a fair shake in court. Just go with the officer. You're going to get a fair shake in court. Don't resist here. Go to the dungeon and have your fair shake in court. Get your fair shake. Go to the dungeon, and then you're going to get a fair shake in court. The state has endless resources. You're going to spend your whole savings that you were going to go to Hawaii with your family for. You're going to spend it on making sure you don't live in a dungeon. And then of the 3 or 4 charges that the model penal code creates, you're going to have to plead guilty to something. And here's the real kicker, and I thought about this today because I knew I was going to give this lecture tonight. I thought about this today. Here's the thing that it's just like, right? You have to plead guilty to something for the state to show leniency to you, but you didn't do anything wrong. You plead guilty to something and we'll be lenient. What? Wait. Just do the math in your head. You don't got to be a philosopher or Einstein here. You want me to admit I did something that I didn't do, so you'll take it easy on the punishment you're going to give me. And if I don't admit that I did this wrong, that I did whatever you were claiming I did, then it's going to be far worse for me. What? What the are you talking about? I'm not pleading guilty to anything. I didn't do anything. In 2001, 2002, when I had 5 felonies against me, each one carrying a 5-year prison sentence, I hired Robert Shapiro, and with 2 or 3 hearings in, when he got Chief of Police Michael Moore on the stand, and he embarrassed that fool because he was lying, okay? When that happened, they had to drop 3 of the charges immediately because they were fake charges. They got Michael Moore was on the stand, the current LA Chief of Police. In the year 2002, he was a detective, and he's the guy who no-knock raided me. And then when I hired Robert Shapiro, he gets Michael Moore on the stand. He says, I admitted to him during the interview that I was in fact a drug dealer. I stand up like Perry Mason, shut you liar, right? This guy just said that I admitted I was a drug dealer, which I would not deal drugs. No chance, right? Shapiro tells me in an open court, looks at me and he says, sit down and shut your fucking mouth. And if you ever burst out again like that again, I quit, in front of the judge and everybody else. And the judge picks up his gavel to slam it down because I burst out. But then he goes like this. He goes, beep, beep, beep. We got it. So I shut up. So then I didn't know he was rope-a-doping Michael Moore. What he was doing was he then asked him, he goes, so my client confessed that he was a drug dealer. He goes, yeah. He goes, okay. He goes, so you no-knock raided his house? Yeah, we did. And then when you no-knock raided it, typically they film that. Did you guys film it? He goes, yeah, of course we filmed it. We always film a no-knock raid. So then he goes, okay. And he goes, then when you went through his house, you accessed his safe, you accessed his medicine chest, you accessed his refrigerator under his sink. Did you access those places? Yes, I did. Did you film those places? Yes, I did. You said that you located a personal amount of drugs, narcotics. Where did you find that? I found that in the fridge. And when you found that, did you film that? You found that personal use of narcotics? He said, yes, I did. I said, okay, great. And he goes, and then when you went in and you grabbed Mr. DeCastro and you put him in handcuffs and took him out, did you guys film that? And he said, yes, we did. And then he said, when you sat down Mr. DeCastro and you asked him if he was a drug dealer and he admitted it, did you film that? The whole courtroom, bunch of people, they go, oh, because he goes, no. He goes, so you raid the guy's house, everything, the tiny amount of drugs you find, you film that, but then he confesses and you don't film his confession. Here's what happens. The DA, immediately the judge lops off 3 charges. He lops off 3 of those charges. They're gone. The judge says, as soon as Michael Moore says, no, I didn't film it, then, because that was the only evidence they had against me, was my testimony to Michael Moore when he told me kids were dying, and I told him everything I could about a narcotic named GHB that I was taking. No shame in it. Anyway, I don't want to talk about drugs on this channel, but anyway, here's the point. So the judge, Shapiro, then said to the judge, Your Honor, I move to dismiss the distribution of drugs charge, the trafficking charge, and the manufacture for distribution charge immediately. Each one carries 5 years. And the judge said, agreed, slams his gavel, those 3 charges are dismissed. The DA calls us into a meeting. So me and Robert Shapiro go into a meeting with the district attorney. He says, you still have a possession charge that's a felony. He said, and you still have a transportation across state lines of a narcotic. So, because he said, did you do it in Vegas? And I said, yes. And so he goes, so you still have those 2 charges against you. He said, I want you to plead to a felony right now to the distribution, to the traveling across state lines with narcotics. I want you to plead guilty right now, 1 year in prison, 1.5 years of parole. And if you don't plead guilty now to the traveling with narcotics across state lines, I'm going to refile the other 3 charges tomorrow. I look at Shapiro and I say, can he refile the charge? He says, yeah, he can refile them. So I reach down deep, and I look up and I say, go fuck yourself. I'm not pleading guilty to anything. No chance, no how, no way. We walked. I would later have to plead guilty to possession of a narcotic, take a 18-month probationary period that if I didn't get in any trouble, I would have no record. I got in no trouble, so I have no record. The experience of being arrested and no-knock raided and going to jail is why you've met this wall, is why I built this wall. I had to find out how the police could no-knock raid someone who certainly had never had anything to do with drug dealing, but more than that, had never created a victim. There's no victims. So I don't know what you're doing here. I haven't hurt anybody in my life, so I don't know why you're here. And now you know why I made it, for conceptual analysis, because you zoom in, not me, you zoom in. Zoom in on the lynching charge. Zoom in on the presidents. Take a good look and then look up and see what laws were passed and see if you can start to put things together so that you learn some stuff. So you can show your kids that our country's ruined if we don't change the Supreme Court. We're ruined. Okay,